Tuesday night, December 17, 1996, 14 terrorists attacked 210 Tomás Alba Edison Street, San Isidro, Japanese embassy. Hidden in a recently stolen ambulance, they slipped past the police guard. They parked at the house next door, called the security guard, and without raising suspicion, held him at gunpoint. They entered the neighboring house, found the wall next to the embassy, and set off a bomb to break through the concrete, to break into the party and capture the more than 700 people who were there that night celebrating the birthday of the Japanese emperor. Among them were the president's mother, sister, and brother, the foreign minister, other ministers, congressmen, politicians, mayors, high-ranking officers from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and police, executives, diplomats, and business people from all continents, as well as the ambassadors from all these countries, including, of course, Ambassador Aoki, the Japanese ambassador, along with many of his fellow countrymen.
And in theory, Peru had been pacified. At least, that was what Fujimori had been proclaiming for 3 years.
The explosion shakes the foundations and guests. The sound appeared to come from outside. Some took time to grasp what was happening, while others felt déjà vu from the noise. There wasn't much time to think anyway, because at 8:19 p.m., 14 Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement members carried out what they had practiced for months. They knew the doors, the rooms. They had a model and even a guest list. They had planned this for a long time. They felt anxious, determined, euphoric, and empowered by weapons. They had been recruited for this, trained, and tested in the field. They appeared young, but were experienced with rifles and hiding their faces.
They were a real beast, used to killing.
Following their rehearsal, they began with insults and waist-level shots, subduing all guests within seconds. Then it was time to break them, to scare them with direct phrases. If everyone dies today, it's the government's fault, not ours.
I wondered how I'd feel when the bullet hit me.
Terror suddenly grips the 700 people inside, as well as the police and private security outside. They still couldn't understand how or when this had happened. They recklessly fired tear gas canisters into the property, worsening the situation for everyone inside. Everyone was unprepared except the terrorists, who were ready.
They put on gas masks, but nothing happened.
Anyway, the leader soon gets tired of the scolding and decides to issue the first official threat to the outside. One more bomb and we'll kill them all. Then Ambassador Aoki comes out to reinforce the message, to urge calm. It was more than official. We faced history's largest terrorist kidnapping, led by Nestor Serpa Cartolin, known as Comrade Evaristo, a prominent Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement leader. Some recognized him instantly. News reached the government palace right away.
The problem was already complex, of course, but when they told me that my mother, my sister, my brother, my father, and other relatives were also there, I said to myself, the situation is much more difficult, and the demands could reach unimaginable extremes.
What are you asking for?
First, the release of all our comrades who are imprisoned, who are being mistreated and tortured in the dungeons of these prisons. I repeat again what our mission is, our release. The release of all our comrades, and if Fujimori doesn't give in, well, let him try.
There were 4 terrorist demands, all concrete yet absurd. The first was the release of 456 Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement members. The second was the transfer of all of them to the Peruvian jungle, along with 15 hostages as a guarantee. The third was a change in the economic system, and finally, a war tax, a compensation.
Of $6 million and a change in the economic model. It was blackmail they wanted to impose on the government.
On top of that, an ultimatum. Alberto Fujimori had until noon to meet the first demand, releasing the 456 Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement members in prison. Otherwise, his trusted man, the highest-ranking hostage Chancellor Tudela, would be killed first.
The leader told me they would kill me the next day at 12 noon. I told my wife I was a dead man.
Fujimori likely faced pressure equal to the problem. The consequences of a bad decision or a misstep could be catastrophic, regrettable. With each passing minute, doubts multiplied. But above them all, a single great certainty resurfaced, one inherited from difficult times and prevailing over everything else.
You don't negotiate with terrorists.
Meanwhile, a hostage at the embassy helped marking the first act of heroism. It was the Swiss negotiator Michael Minin, a Red Cross delegate with experience in war zones and a fairly respectable Spanish. He took the initiative, stood in front of Serpa, and managed to get him to listen. He sat down with him and gave him a couple of war tips. He quickly convinced him that showing a more human side to society would best benefit his plans, image, and cause. The government and the Geneva Conventions of War. Releasing the hostages is best, not just for marketing, but also administratively. 700 frightened people. They were hard to control. There were 14 total, 4 leaders, 8 young men, and 2 young women.
Michel Minin's intervention was a great relief.
Serpa, now convinced and motivated, chooses to improve his image by displaying his kindness and mercy. Of course, starting with the most vulnerable, the least powerful, and finally women. This is how Serpa begins to release one by one the service staff, the elderly, and finally all the ladies present.
Only men were left.
This is where Comrade Evaristo makes his gravest mistake, one that would haunt him for life, losing Mutsue Inamoto and Juana Fujimori as hostages, the mother and sister of the president, 2 of his most beloved women. Serpa understood this deeply. He knew exactly what a man in command would do for the woman he loves. No one knew it at that moment, but Serpa's motivation went beyond politics, and we'll talk more about Nancy Gilbonio later. Surely Serpa thought about her at that moment, about how he fell, about the terrible guerrilla mistake he made, and all the advantage he lost. Serpa almost lost his mind, but he was still waiting for an answer. In the Pentagonito, time was running out, but the decision had already been made. Fujimori would respond negatively to the terrorists' demands, even knowing how costly that resounding no could be. For him, it was a death sentence for Tudela. Everything would then depend on Serpa Cardeline's fury and his ability to control his anger after getting more bad news so quickly. Considering the worst-case scenario was awful, but seeing the alternative made the decision easy. Not easy, but those were long years when Peru lived in fear or in mourning. 35,000 people killed, bridges, roads, buildings, and electrical infrastructure destroyed, social and political crisis, economic and technological decline, less investment, and a shrinking market. That's not even counting bombs, fires, torture, kidnappings, rapes, disappearances, trafficking, and child recruitment, and of course all the psychological impact that came with living in fear all those years. Years when, at certain times, you couldn't go out, didn't know if you'd have electricity at night, or if that car on the corner had a bomb. The worst part is, I'm not even telling the whole story. There isn't enough time. If you lived through it, you'll never forget. If, like me, you were little and don't remember it, or you weren't born yet, I'm sure some older relative told you about it, or you studied it in school. And if that's not the case, it's still no excuse for not knowing who these people were and everything they did to us. Knowing this, it's clear why the decision was made so quickly. Accepting terrorist demands would allow their resurgence. I can imagine how difficult it was for Francisco Tudela, unable to deceive his intelligence, grasping group logic, and resignedly seeing it wasn't personal. An entire country and its president had no choice but to sentence him to death. It's that simple.
It wasn't a unilateral decision. It was the decision of a country that had suffered more than a decade of horrible terrorist attacks.
Time was up and Serpa approached him.
He told me that as foreign minister he admired my work and that he was sorry to kill me.
But he didn't do it.
Then I heard the click. The chamber was empty.
And not due to a lack of courage or cruelty. Serpa knew once he fired, the Peruvian army's best squad would storm in, furious and better armed. He and his henchmen would be wiped out in minutes. In the meantime, they might have time to kill many hostages, maybe most of them. But that wasn't the real mission. Serpa was in a hurry, but he hadn't come in to die. Fujimori understood this clearly and acted accordingly. It wasn't that hard to read Comrade Evaristo. The terrorists weren't very bright people. They were passionate, and that made them as cruel as they were predictable. This threat, this ultimatum they even sent by fax, didn't seem to be anything more than a lie, a trick, a bluff.
That threat won't be carried out. Only then will we finally able to set the very narrow framework in which the terrorists could operate.
Then the long-awaited message to the nation arrived.
Have the captors surrender their arms to a guarantor commission and allow evacuation of all hostages without exception. In this way, the possibility of the use of force by the Peruvian state will also be ruled out. From there, a solution can be safely explored.
Surrender meekly, and then we'll see what we do next. That's how it sounded inside Serpa's head. I can picture his anger. Another loss, after assuring his followers it would end in hours or 2 days at most. Now everyone was looking at him surprised, unsettled. Serpa took a breath and acted as any egocentric extremist would. He grew stubborn, hid his fear with firmness, and stood firm. The looks were wrong. The plan would work. It was only a matter of time.
The uncertainty of not knowing when it's going to end.
Nobody knew how much time would pass, but I'm sure that neither Serpa nor the president nor the hostages imagined that this was just the beginning of a long and tortuous journey of more than 4 months. 126 days in total, but not all the hostages made it to the final stretch. Only the 72 considered politically most valuable. In this chart, we can see the release dates, the number of hostages released, and those remaining. After the departure of women, adults, and day one workers, the number went from over 700 people to 371 men, 118 of them foreigners. Naturally, political pressure arrived quickly. From Bill Clinton to the Japanese, German, British, and Austrian chancellors, they all gave their support to Alberto Fujimori and cautiously asked him to prioritize something he was already quite clear about. There should be no deaths except for terrorist casualties.
Peruvian-Japanese relations could be deeply damaged. If any of the hostages died,
it was easy to say, but what everyone was asking for bordered on the impossible. The hard part wasn't eliminating the 14 Emeritistas. The real problem was that at the first sound of military approach, the bloodthirsty men would carry out what was written in their laws and protocol, what they had practiced and sworn many times. Execute them all.
We're going to die, but first you're going to die.
So what was the solution to such a big problem? Even rescuing most of them alive seemed unlikely at first glance and on paper, even more so if you looked at the history of similar cases in the area. In Bogota, for example, when M19 seized the Palace of Justice in 1985, 111 people died. In Texas, United States, the failure was greater, resulting in deaths of both hostages and commandos. In Nicaragua, the 1978 Congress rescue resulted in just 4 deaths, but they had to release 50 terrorists and pay $500,000.
The Tupac Amaru movement specialized in kidnappings. They were very violent, and they had already killed many people.
So how would Peru get out of this? Alive without collapsing politically and socially, but above all, without opening the doors to terrorism? How did the president plan to act? What were they cooking up? Why so much silence? These were some of the questions circulating among the national and international press. The kidnapping at the Japanese embassy in Peru, of course, received unprecedented coverage. It was broadcast day and night without rest by the largest television networks and echoed by the world press, who engaged in a fierce competition to rent the spots with the best view of the residents. A fierce subwar pushed the price per square meter to $4,000. The government clearly rented the best locations. They needed all the properties around the embassy. Few had noticed, but there was already a plan in motion. There were actually 2 plans, executed separately, but ultimately complementary. The first was to form a commission of guarantors to negotiate a peaceful solution. At first, there was a faint hope of reaching a reasonable agreement, but it soon became clear that this first plan would only serve as a distraction, a way to buy time to set the second plan in motion, the only one that could really get them out of there. The military solution.
There was never any solution other than the military one.
There were many meetings, but none of them succeeded. The closest thing to a deal was when Serpa wrote 11 names on a piece of paper. including his girlfriend Nancy Gilbonio. Once they were released and left the residence, the next day Serpa forgot the previous discussion and reverted to his original all-or-nothing stance. Apparently, he lost an internal vote in the residence. These meetings helped us understand their thinking, organization, predict their moves, gather intelligence, and most importantly, buy time.
I'm here so that you respect me. You're not going to set off those grenades.
The real solution was always clear. The idea of a military incursion was brought to the table from day one. The first to take a name and form was the Papanuel Plan, set for December 25th. The Papanuel Plan consisted of taking advantage of the noise from the midnight fireworks to climb over the rooftops and sneak in through the windows. But it was discarded soon after due to too many risks and predictability. It was never carried out. However, evaluating and rejecting the Papanuel Plan clarified the challenges of achieving surprise. Thanks to this first failure, the final idea took shape. A network of tunnels, like those of the Chavín culture, was dug without machinery, just as it was 3,000 years ago. This time as a precaution to avoid the noise. The suspicions involved 4 people starting from 4 rented houses behind the embassy, crossing the residence's garden, and ending at 5 points. The explosives would go through the last one, destined to detonate in the kitchen, dining room, and ballroom. Meanwhile, 140 of the Peruvian army's most highly trained commandos, all experienced in war and counter-terrorism, would enter through the other tunnels. But experience wouldn't be enough this time. That's why the government decided to maximize precision by building an exact replica of the embassy. Using the original blueprints, they managed to recreate each of the residence's spaces at an astonishing speed. Hundreds of commandos had already been training since day one. In this Carrillo's building, now a museum, they practiced choreographies, rehearsed and did simulations. 2 groups formed. Alpha attacked the first floor, Delta the second. In addition, they would be covered by security elements, support, and snipers. The Navy joined them to take charge of the explosives. Different forces working together day and night with a single objective, the same one that also motivated their colleagues underground, the other squad of heroes who did their part 5 meters underground. There were a total of 32 expert miners brought from Cerro de Pasco, who lived secluded in those houses for more than 4 months until the day of the rescue. They couldn't go out or contact anyone, not even call their families to say they were okay. Their sacrifice had a purpose. Secrecy was essential. No information could leak, nothing could go wrong. At the embassy, time dragged on as the government's extreme measures impacted the hostages. No water, little food, and nothing to do all day except begin to resign themselves. Soon the bathrooms collapsed along with patients and nerves.
A lot of people had nervous bowels.
Besides the awful living conditions, the hostages endured constant psychological abuse. Torturing them was part of the terrorist protocol.
They cocked the gun against their heads.
They cocked their rifles, aimed at us, pulled out grenades, removed the safety, just like they obviously did in their drills.
I want them to give me my dad back. That's all I want.
I wonder who suffered more, the prisoners or their families, knowing all they endured, living with constant anguish, unsure if they'd see them again, helpless with them nearby but unable to open the door. People grew impatient as the government's silence made things worse. Days went by, and there was no news or progress. The only thing that seemed to be advancing was everyone's desperation inside. The government didn't help and actually seemed to raise tensions, staying silent but making a loud, unbearable noise. They blasted music through speakers that no one understood, but it was all part of the plan. The music served 2 purposes. The first, of course, was to cover up the noise of the miners who were already starting the work. And as a side effect, it could also be used to measure Serpa's tolerance, to evaluate his behavior. In the face of this seemingly defiant act, the terrorist leader got upset, but he didn't do much more.
We wanted a solution that would allow us to get out alive.
To ease tensions, the Red Cross delivered daily food and supplies, and donations soon followed. Portable toilets, books, guitars, thermoses, Bibles, and religious items, such as figurines, paintings, and rosaries. Almost all of them were brought in with the real intention of hiding a tiny high-tech microphone. Dozens of them were brought in over the weeks. The issue quickly shifted from listening as devices even reached Serpa, Cardeline's room. Now the real challenge was to make themselves heard. It was imminent. They needed an inside ally, someone to deliver information and follow instructions. They tried secret messages and letters with clues, encrypted codes, and other ideas, without knowing that fate didn't want them to find someone, but rather to be found by this man, Admiral Luis Jean Pietri, one of the greatest heroes of this story. His involvement in the operation was extremely vital. His secret was to keep his military mind not to sink, and above all, never stop thinking.
One day while we were playing cards, he looked out the window and told us,
That guy up there on the roof was my student in the operations force.
Jean Pietri, former Navy General Staff Chief, had military intelligence knowledge and anti-terrorist combat experience. It was easy for him to assume that the bugs had already been brought in by the Red Cross, and that most likely an intelligence group was on the other side listening to everything. He began trying to reach the outside. It wasn't easy without raising suspicion, and when he managed to do it, he didn't know where to start or how to find an answer. Days passed without contact, but he persisted.
I'm a hostage. I have this Viper number. If you're listening to me, answer me.
Who was he talking to?
I talked to everything, the paintings, thermoses, and even the toilets they installed. People thought I was a bit crazy.
One day, his friend Tudela gave him helpful advice about using the outside speakers, which he quickly followed. So he decided to make a music request.
If you're listening, play La Cucaracha. If you're listening, play La Cucaracha.
And the next morning, La Cucaracha started playing. The microphones were real, and the terrorists were upset by the music. It seemed like a mockery. While those involved couldn't hide their enormous happiness, they had made contact. At that moment, the madness that Colonel Fernandez committed during the first days of captivity made sense, hiding his Viper from the terrorist searches. That decision by Colonel Fernandez was also crucial. He understood that his Viper could be very useful when the time came, so he risked his life in that attempt, and now time proved him right. For those who never used a Viper like me, they were small devices for receiving short text messages. You called a central office, dictated your message and the Viper number, and they sent it. Without this advanced technology, this story would have had a much sadder, darker ending. Although that part comes later.
Tomorrow I'll bring you the Japanese ambassador's ear or the chancellor's finger.
As time went by, smooth communication was established, and Jean Pietri already had the most accessible and discreet microphones at hand. He contacted the National Intelligence Service daily at set times when he could avoid surveillance. Enough time to send all the required information and receive very precise instructions. A long list of them that ended with a password, the one that would start everything. Mari is sick. Everything was almost ready. The tunnel was about to be finished. The commandos had every step choreographed. The explosives worked perfectly, and the snipers didn't miss a shot. All that remained was to choose the right moment to act on what they had prepared for months. D-Day was inevitable. The president felt satisfied, believing they had the plan he wanted. All was ready on the military, intelligence, and planning fronts. Deception had been crucial. Fujimori spent months deceiving the Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement members with elaborate smokescreens. He made them believe that the negotiations were progressing and that they had more and more international allies. It was a perfect act that bought valuable time. But Fujimori wasn't alone. He had a broad team, led by his trusted generals, Hermosa Rios, Jaime Patiño, William Zapata, Colonels Juan Escura, Zamudio Aliaga, and ministers like Salazar Moroy and Absaon Vasquez. Maybe I'm forgetting some important high-ranking officer, but one name I would never forget is this man, Vladimiro Montesinos. Even though many reports and texts find it hard or prefer not to mention his name, He didn't have an imposing position like the ministers or the generals. Still, he became the most famous man in Fujimori's government due to his closeness, influence, intelligence, and the darkness of his actions. His experience in counterterrorism combat and his sharply criminal mindset were key during the planning and military intelligence of the Chavín de Huántar operation. Serpa's calculations were no match for those of the director of the SIN. Vladimiro was not only as ruthless as him, but also much more cunning and stealthy.
Everyone knew about Vladimiro Montesinos, but we never really saw him.
April 22, 1997. D-Day. 195 of the most skilled members of the armed forces. Thousands waited for the order as commandos entered the tunnel. When the time came, the Navy would detonate the bombs, and after that, everything was up to fate. The dice had already been cast the night before. Each of them wrote a letter in case they didn't return, fully aware that some would be open. Many hostages likely wanted to do the same, but didn't know about the plan or the work involved. There were very few people Gianpietri had been able to trust. His training actually led him to do the opposite, to distrust almost everyone, not to risk the plan. Only a few were chosen to bear the great weight of that secret along with him.
And he had to do it because I didn't know if any of them disagreed with what I was doing.
The 0 hour had arrived. It was time to reveal the secret to the other hostages, to tell them that the armed forces were on their way and that they needed to take their positions. Many thought it was a joke, some were scared, but most finally felt the freedom they had long awaited. Shortly before giving the signal, the group gathered to talk quietly, aware that for some, it would be a farewell. They estimated that probably a third of them would die, though no one dared look at him. Everyone thought of Chancellor Tudela, first on the blacklist. The terrorists did that almost daily. Death was close, but there was no time to think. They were ready and in position. Second floor doors open, everyone in light-colored clothes for identification. The terrorists were playing soccer like every afternoon, right above the bombs, suspecting nothing. This was the moment. Mari is sick. Mari is sick. When suddenly and inexplicably, a helicopter flew overhead.
We reported that there was a helicopter that almost ruined the operation. I don't know what a helicopter was doing flying over the building a few minutes before the operation, and they stopped playing soccer.
Even though everything was calculated, the plan took 3 hard hits before the first explosion. The last 2 happened just seconds before, but the first one was a low blow. It happened on March 6 weeks before D-Day, and it started because of that unfortunate front page, published by the newspaper La Repubblica, where they revealed the secret that the government had worked so hard to protect. The tunnel does exist. The news reached Serpa immediately.
It was something very sensitive and could have caused many deaths.
After that, things inside the embassy got more difficult. That statement never left their minds. Fujimori, who never spoke, had to come out to mislead. He acknowledged the tunnel's existence, saying they were as likely as an air attack. Snipers, the use of paralytic gases, laxatives in the food, and many other methods that, as a precaution and protocol, had to be evaluated. After this, the plans changed. The excavation work had to be stopped and the rescue date was reconsidered. Any misstep was risky. We had to wait for things to calm down. The second major problem remains a mystery. No one gives a clear explanation about that helicopter, nor why it flew over right at the agreed time, as if someone with inside information wanted to alert their comrades inside. Unfortunately, there is very little information about this topic.
This obviously also alerted the Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement members in a way which caused it not to have the intended effect.
Alerted, the terrorists left their ideal positions. Some went to the windows, others instinctively reached for their weapons. Precision had been lost, there was no turning back, the order had already been given.
I continue. We are losing valuable minutes and seconds.
Here the third major problem occurred. The bombs didn't work, they failed to explode. No one understood the technical delay. Rear Admiral Tello acted manually. It was 41 endless seconds for the hostages when suddenly They had rehearsed it for months. First, 3 bombs would detonate across the first floor of the runway. The helicopter saved some, but 6 fell. The stunned survivors grabbed their weapons and ran for the stairs. One of them was Sirpa Cardellin, who, by inertia, staggered up toward the hostages, shocked and with death before his eyes, but still thinking of revenge as a final taste, and maybe for a second, before taking dozens of military bullets. He also thought of Nancy, his girlfriend and the mother of his child, who was captured a year earlier with Laurie Berenson, and sadly wasn't released until 2010, 13 years later. It's interesting to consider that had he known Sirpa might not have entered, just 3 days earlier, he had revealed his deepest and most secret intentions when he told Cipriani, "Release her and we'll leave." This statement would cost him everyone's respect. His subordinates turned against him. Anyway, Fujimori rejected the offer. Sirpa died as a traitor to his country and his supposed ideals.
He was a psychopathic man.
But the commandos didn't just enter through the first floor. They did so through 6 different strategic points in order to cover each of the 7 rooms where the 72 hostages were distributed. Delta Group quickly secured the 2nd floor.
It exploded instantly like Spider-Man dropping down. Commando.
Things upstairs didn't go as well as downstairs. A terrorist entered the magistrate's room following his protocol. Not seeing anyone, he opened fire throughout the entire room. The shots hit the walls and the closets, right where the magistrates, Carlos Justi, Luis Sirpa, and Mario Urina were hiding. They were all wounded by the bullets, but Judge Justi had the misfortune of being hit by one of them in the femoral vein. The blood loss would cause him to lose his life minutes later on the way to the hospital. In the other rooms, things weren't going any better. Terrorist Pone relentlessly searched for Francisco Tudela, bursting into the room where Tudela was supposed to be, but didn't find him. When the operation started, a terrorist came in. I changed places. I went to another room. He ran to the room that was assigned to me, and he aimed at the spot where I always was, but the spot was empty. But his fanaticism persisted. He seemed not to understand that in seconds the commandos would find him, and that there was nothing to gain by killing him anymore. He kept going, spotted Tudela ahead, and threw a grenade. It hit the doorframe and exploded mid-air. The shrapnel pierced Tudela's back, and a piece of businessman Pedro Aritomi's thigh was blown off. They kept moving forward, but the terrorist, blinded by hatred, didn't stop. He approached and aimed his rifle. Tudela's end was imminent when, at that moment, Colonel Valor appeared, one of the most important and brave commandos of the squad. His clear mission was to find and protect Chancellor Tudela, which he did by stepping between him and Cohn's gunfire. 2 bullets got past the vest, one hitting the neck and another the liver. Everything happened very quickly. Tudela only understood that he was alive. The gunshots kept going and he decided to throw himself headfirst down the stairs. Earlier, a bullet hit his left fibula, but he survived. The commandos advanced, searching for terrorists and rescuing hostages, fulfilling their oath and honor. Commander Jimenez was heading to Room F with the Japanese businessmen, as his mission required, when he was killed in close combat. Then he was hit by a grenade, the same one that would sever Lieutenant Cruz Hirama's leg, who survived. Jimenez wasn't as fortunate. The operation proceeded as planned. All the food doors exploded and the blast also blew up the terrorist's door, causing a chain reaction. Soon everything was filled with smoke and dust. It all happened in a matter of seconds. Hundreds of stories unfolding in such a short time. Many hostages fought for their lives during this time, like the Japanese businessmen, including Ambassador Aoki, who had to jump 4 meters to escape the fire. Many suffered fractures, and all were shocked by the bombs and events. 25 commandos injured, 1 with a left foot amputated, 2 dead, 71 hostages freed. Everything else went as planned. The hostages were safe, the 14 Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement members eliminated, and the wounded were being treated. The losses were extremely painful, but still well below the estimated number. Even in optimistic scenarios, they had beaten the odds in terrorism. Afterward, they indulged themselves just as any Peruvian would have wanted, climb up to the highest point of the embassy, where the flag of terror was flying. To tear it down quickly, throw it skyward for everyone, then burn it so it can never return. And finally, to replace it with the real one, the flag of Peru. Both the commandos and the hostages came out injured but victorious from that place. After 4 months, they finally saw the light and became intoxicated by long-awaited freedom. Outwardly, they were destroyed by bombs, gunfire, and grenades, yet inside, they'd never been happier.
Admiral Giampietri saw me and asked, "Are you hurt?" And I answered him, "No, we are saved."
The reunion with the families at the military hospital was heartbreaking. Hundreds who spent 4 months believing they'd never see their loved ones again. The time had come to hug, to kiss, to recover all those postponed moments and words. It was a great victory, undeniable and celebrated by Peru and the world. Operation Chavín de Huántar dealt an almost fatal blow to terrorism in our country, as well as a major lesson on a global scale, a clear message on how to deal with them. I'm not going to talk today about all the good things or all the bad things that I think Alberto Fujimori did before and after this. I'll tackle that challenge soon in another video. Operation Chavín de Huántar was undeniably very successful. Peru was defended with intelligence and bravery. The planning and execution were so effective that they are still studied by anti-terrorist training schools worldwide. Meanwhile, in Peru, that level of terror has never returned. Only small remnants, scraps, and ashes remain of them. Ashes that neither burn nor die. And that's why it's extremely important to remember that they're there and why we must never let them ignite again. Then everyone sang the national anthem. There's no act more heroic than willingly giving your life to defend and free your country. The Chavín de Huántar commandos entered, proudly risking their lives for their country and land. Most became intoxicated by the smoke, dozens were injured, and 2 never returned home. Captain Raúl Jiménez, 28, was among the best with a bright future, while Commander Valera was a distinguished veteran. He was 39 with 2 children, who had to read a letter meant never to be read, ending with, "My homeland calls me. I'll become a beast, and if I must die for her freedom, I will without hesitation."
To listen with satisfaction and pride in the end victory. And those words I will never erase from my mind.
Today, I'm sending a mission we're going in with excitement. Super happy because obviously this operation is important. It's exactly what I was seeking. We'll be there to rescue, full of excitement.
Earlier, I mentioned that this story didn't have a happy ending, and even though it might seem like it now, I wasn't referring to this. Of course, what happened with Valera and Jiménez is sad. Their sacrifice brought such honor and glory that today, they stand with Gru Cáceres and Bolognesi among the great heroes.
Just like my husband was, I congratulate them and encourage them to continue, as they always did their best, and everything was a success. So there's no reason for them to be sad. All of this will pass. We are all certain of that.
Before entering the tunnel, I made the sign of the cross and said, "My God, if this operation doesn't go well, don't let me come out alive in the residence."
She said, "Whatever is happening, I volunteer myself."
We were prepared and simply aware that we had to fulfill the mission, even at the cost of our own lives.
These are the decorations that a commando has, right? The best decorations aren't the medals or the certificates, but the mud from the operation, the sweat. Sometimes the best decoration is a bullet hole from a shot that missed its mark.
For me, it's a personal pride. I always think that we did it for Peru.
The truly sad ending I'm referring to happened after the rescue and for many years. Incredibly, the heroes of this story were later persecuted, prosecuted, and defamed by human rights organizations, the judiciary, and the public prosecutor's office. As incredible as it may sound, they were accused of the crime of aggravated homicide and real concealment to the detriment of the Peruvian state. They requested 15 to 18 years in prison for both the high-ranking officers as indirect perpetrators and the commandos as ordinary murderers who risked their lives.
The people of Peru should have a little respect for these authorities, for these military men who went in to defend with their lives.
That's why Admiral Giampietri titled his book Hostage Forever. They never let them rest. That's the sad ending I mentioned. The operation succeeded and left terrorism weakened. Yet some still defended it from inside the state and courts. They released them, compensated them, and tried to vindicate them.
Do you guarantee that you won't?
Well, I'm not going to interfere. I'm not going to interfere with the independence of the branches of government. I respect the judiciary.
Time passes and Peru forgets. That story is well known. Many avoid calling them terrorists, preferring terms like guerrillas, rebels, or social fighters. Empathizing with them now seems politically correct for some, but I guess that's just different ways of thinking. Mine watches them from across the street with a bit of disgust, to be honest. I think I've read some books, watched documentaries, interviews, biographies, and testimonies, and I've cross-checked enough information and sources, enough to have a firm stance against those who committed the most inhuman acts you can imagine. I'm not even referring to the Japanese embassy or Tarata now, because the vast majority of its nearly 70,000 victims, both dead and missing, were concentrated in the most vulnerable areas of the country's interior, the very ones they promised to rescue.
For these communists in Congress, homicide is a political act.
It's impossible to empathize with them, knowing what they've done. You don't need personal experience or deep investigation. Today, any adult or teenager with some reading and curiosity could be very well informed if they wanted. But most people, especially the young, aren't interested in this. That's why I think that those of us who value history, who have taken the time to study it and want to preserve it, also have the duty to pass it on.
We wouldn't want that life to come back anymore. Who would want that life from before? That's why right now when we remember, our hearts beat faster.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and share it to support the channel. If you found the topic interesting and would like me to recommend the best books, write to me on Instagram. Goodbye.
In my heart, I have the recognition of the Peruvian people. I have the recognition of society in general. Despite the problems that arose, I wouldn't hesitate for a single second to participate again.
People die when forgotten. I believe this operation has been important nationally, not just for my family or me. Yeah, it gave us peace, and that's why in part I weigh the loss of a father, but we gain a hero.
That I love him very much, and thank you for everything he has done.
Because of everything we did! We did it for Peru!